Welcome back to the SDG Warriors Podcast. I'm Simar Mohanty, the team lead and student coordinator of the SDG Warriors. We're a team of passionate student changemakers and STEMnists on a mission to meet the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, leveraging the power of STEM education and 21st century skills. Brought to you by us SDG Warriors, this podcast features inspiring stories from STEM experts and edu heroes from around the world. Ideals for students, teachers, parents, and pretty much anybody interested in STEM education and social impact. This podcast aims to provide enriching learning experiences and drive positive change in local, global, and digital communities. Well, buckle up for a blockbuster chat because today we are joined in by an amazing woman in STEM who turned her stage presence from Shakespeare to studying the shaking of the very sphere of Earth. Pun intended. Dr. Wendy Bohon Dr. Wendy Bohon is a dynamic scientist who transitioned from a career in acting to becoming a leading voice in earthquake geology and science communication. After feeling the impact of the Hector Mine earthquake, Dr. Wendy pivoted from Hollywood to the USGS, blending her geology background with her outreach and educational efforts. Her career has spanned significant roles, including her position as a strategic communications specialist at NASA's Earth Science Division, where she has helped to bridge the gap between scientists and public. And she's also worked with the IRIS, the Incorporated Research Institutions for Seismology, managing global seismic data communications. And in addition to her research in paleoseismology and active fault systems, Dr. Wendy is an advocate for women in STEM, serving as an AAAS If ambassador and a founding member of 500 Women Scientists. Well, as a STEMness myself, I feel so honored to have you on a podcast today, Dr. Wendy.
Well, it is such an honor to meet you, and it's an honor to be here and talk to all of your listeners today. Thank you for inviting me.
Truly, it's such a pleasure. And before we dive into today's conversation, to help our listeners audibly visualize the entire experience, can you please tell us where are you located? What is the weather like outside? And what can you see from your window right now?
Oh, I love this. So I am located in Sacramento, California. For me, it's 9 o'clock in the morning. I'm sitting in my bedroom office looking out the front window, and there's a lot of trees. I can see two hummingbirds sitting on a branch right outside my window, and they are chattering away. And we also have a wild turkey that's walking down the street. So there's a lot of action happening outside my window right now.
That's so interesting. And it's similar to the scene here in India. It's an electric atmosphere. I'm in Bangalore, where the air is filled with the vibrant sounds of Garba festivities because people, they're celebrating Navratri. It's a warm 26 degrees Celsius. And outside my window, I can see the streets which are bustling with people in royal blue. There are lights and there are lots of colorful decorations for the festivities. So now that we have the scene set, let's call it lights, camera, and action, diving right into our conversation. First up, we were curious to know, what does a typical day in the life of Dr. Wendy look like?
One of the things I love about what I do is that every single day is different, although almost all of them start with email. But I think that's most jobs. I get to do all sorts of different things. I do things like reviewing geologic maps and fault maps. I go out and I talk to communities, to individuals, to government agencies to talk about earthquakes, why it's important to study them, and ways that we can use data and information to make wise land use choices. I sometimes go out into the field to look at active faults. Sometimes that means I go internationally, but often I stay here in California to look at some of the more than 500 active faults that we have right here in my backyard. Today, I have some meetings with some really fascinating people that are doing spectacular work. And that's one of the best things is every single day I get to learn something new about science or about people or just about the world around me and how it works.
Absolutely. It sounds like you have such a dynamic and an impactful role, Dr. Wendy. And definitely, you wear so many hats. It must be a bit challenging to balance all those moving parts, especially with the unpredictability of earthquakes and the rapid response required when they occur. But then your superpower of communication comes into the picture, which connects all these different roles at a common level. Now, considering your journey, transitioning from acting to geology is quite a leap. So let's go back in time into that moment of the Hector Mine earthquake. Dr. Wendy, what was it about that experience that compelled you to pivot your career from the stage to the seismic waves? We'd love to hear the story.
That's it's an interesting story, and I think what it shows is that your path doesn't have to be straightforward. It can be winding and curving, and you just have to buckle in for the ride. So I grew up in Chesapeake, Virginia, which is an active passive plate margin. There was just an earthquake. The passive plate margin. So we didn't really have earthquakes. I had never felt an earthquake, but I grew up feeling very much like an artist. I like to write songs. I write poetry. I would did, pottery wheel. And of course I did acting. So I went to college as a theater major, and I took a geology class while I was there and thought, wow, this is really interesting. So I started taking more geology classes, but I was very focused on theater. And I moved out to Los Angeles in California to do acting work. And while I had been there, I felt a couple of earthquakes, but then I felt the Hector Mine earthquake, which was a magnitude 7.1 out in the desert. So it didn't really hurt anybody, but it was felt widely across Southern California, including in my little apartment in Hollywood, where my surfboard fell on my head. Our little rabbit, Piti La Pen was his name, he jumped up and jumped into the toilet because he was scared, and then he was screaming. All the car alarms are going off, and it was scary, but it was also really fascinating because while I knew there were earthquakes, knowing it and feeling it are two different things. And I was just fascinated. All that night, we kept feeling the aftershocks from the earthquake. And so the next day, I went into the USGS office, which was not too far away from where I was living, and asked if I could volunteer. And that started me on the path I am there. So it was really taking that first leap and putting myself out there, which was a little bit scary, that led me down the path to where I am now.
Absolutely, Dr. Wendy. Listening to your journey, it's incredible how a single life altering event can completely shift the trajectory of our life. Like you said, it's one thing to hear about an earthquake, but another to experience it. I think many of us, especially students, can relate to the feeling of uncertainty about the future. You might never know that what incident can ignite a different passion or can steer you into an unexpected direction. And
Mhm.
definitely, like you described, Dr. Wendy, it's okay to let life's events shape our paths. And it's never too late to switch gears and follow a new passion. Something that's especially interesting is that you didn't leave the skills that you built as an actor behind. In fact, you managed to fuse your communication skills with your scientific expertise. So I have to ask, what surprising parallels did you find between acting on stage and communicating complex scientific concepts to the public?
There is a surprising number of parallels there. And I love this question so much because being a scientist, you have to be really creative, and being an actor, you also have to be creative. But in the end, it's all about communication. As an actor, you take on a role, which means you have to understand yourself and you have to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And as a communicator, you have to understand the concept that you're trying to talk about, but you also have to understand your audience, what they know, what they understand, what their background may be, and how they're likely to understand the information that you're telling them. And so it's good communication is more of a conversation than it is just giving people information. And so learning to understand your audience the same way that you learn to understand a character on the stage. So that was a really unexpected, helpful thing. But then the communication itself, right? When you're on stage, you have to be dynamic, you have to be interesting. You learn how to use your voice as a tool. You learn how to use emotion as a tool. And so scientists often have kind of the stereotype of being robotic, being very boring. We're taught to be objective with our data, but we don't have to be objective with our science. We are passionate about what we do, and it's okay when we're communicating to let that passion shine. And so that's another thing I think that came from acting that I was able to bring into science communication.
I absolutely love that idea, Dr. Wendy, that at the core, both acting and science communication are about storytelling and its different elements. And you're right, whether it's conveying the drama of a Shakespearean tragedy or the dynamics of tectonic plates, it all comes down to engaging your audience. And as students, this lesson is so important, especially in fields like science, like you mentioned, Dr. Wendy, where the way you communicate your ideas can often make or break how impactful your work will be. The power of storytelling, it transcends disciplines. And speaking of transitions, I know after working at USGS, you made the bold decision to return to school for a PhD, and that's not an easy choice. And it's something that a lot of students and professionals consider at different stages of their careers. So, what advice would you give to someone thinking about going back to school, Dr. Wendy?
It's never too late. A lot of times I hear people think, well, I've put so much energy into this career, or I'm too old to start something new. And I really would encourage people to think about it a different way. Anything you learn is never wasted, right? And so even if you had a career beforehand, or if you really identify as, say, an artist or as an engineer, you can always bring what you learned into your new career. And it's okay to try different things. And so the first thing I would say really is just don't be afraid to try, and don't feel like you failed just because you want to try something different. I spent a lot of time being like, oh, am I a failed actress because I didn't take that all the way that I could have? And I wonder what could have happened. But that wasn't the path that I was most interested in. And it's okay to change your path.
Absolutely. And that's such encouraging advice for our listeners today. I think a lot of us fear that once we start down one path, there's no turning back. And we feel like we are left behind if we take a break or we switch directions. But your journey shows us that there's no fixed timeline. It's all about learning. It's all about lifelong learning. It's about evolving and then being open to growth, whether it happens early in your career or later. Taking that leap can lead us to so many rewarding opportunities. And this brings us to a broader conversation about the role of innovation in science. Dr. Wendy, in your research on past earthquakes, what discoveries have surprised you the most, and how can we use that knowledge to prepare for future seismic events?
So one of the things that's interesting or funny, you see cartoons and the scientist is always going, Eureka, I found it. It never happens that way. What always happens is you get your data back and you go, this is weird. Hey, come over here. What do you think about this? That's weird. We should run this experiment again because that's unexpected. And so eventually, after you've done the rigor of doing the work, you say, I think this is a new discovery. I think this really matters. I think this is some brand new knowledge that I have sort of brought into being. And that is a really exciting moment. And so some of the things that I think are kind of the most important discoveries, for instance, I was working in Argentina and on a series of faults near Mendoza, Argentina in the Andes. And we found that the rate of fault movement had sped up, which meant that earthquakes were more likely to happen more quickly. And so that was important for understanding the seismic hazard of that area so that the people that live nearby could have a better understanding of what earthquakes might be coming their way. So we've done that in several places. I was working in Ladakh, India, and we found another active strand of the Karakoram fault, which was really important for the communities in that area. And then, of course, better understanding faults in California and in the United States so that we can make sure that we know what the hazards are. Because if we don't know what the hazards are, we can't adequately plan and prepare for them.
Absolutely. The unexpected findings, they generally prepare us better for potential disasters. And what you mentioned, it emphasizes for us as students and future professionals that we need to stay curious and adaptable. We are not just learning facts, we are building a toolkit for the future. And when you build a toolkit, mistakes happen. But when you look at those mistakes again, those might lead to discoveries. And it also underlines the importance of interdisciplinary work, bridging history, science, and community engagement to create safer environments for everyone. And speaking about innovation, technology plays a big role in today's scientific research. So, Dr. Wendy, can you tell us more about the innovative techniques, technologies, or tools that you utilize for studying earthquakes? And looking at the current advancements of new AI powered technology, what role do you think it plays in the future of earthquake research and seismic hazard communication?
I'll start with the last part of the question first. So, a lot of seismologists and earthquake researchers are using AI to help with pattern recognition. And so, for instance, there's a scientist named Zach Ross at Caltech, and he is taking all of the seismic data that we have in Southern California and applying AI in order to find hidden signals. So there's lots of signals that are going through the earth all the time. You know, there's people walking around, other kinds of anthropogenic noise. We have the wind, we have waves, we have this microseism, this sort of background hum. And that can cover up these small earthquakes. And he's using AI to draw out those earthquakes to a level we've never seen before. So I think there's a lot there in terms of being able to understand what's happening more and get better insight. And, you know, seismology and geology are really interesting because you have to be creative in order to do that work. So seismologists, for instance, study the inside of the earth using seismic waves. They have to because we can't get down inside the earth, right? And so we have to be creative in the tools that we use and the way that we use them. So there's lots of innovation in that space, especially using technology, using distributed acoustic systems and things like that. But then there's also things like, how do we understand what's happened in the past when there was nobody there? So figuring out how we can get rocks to tell a story, and what can we use kind of as a Rosetta Stone to understand the story that they're telling us. And so we use a lot of different dating techniques. One of the things that I did was using a laser in order to extract noble gases, the kinds of gases that are created inside crystals. And so we can figure out how long it took a rock to go from a certain point deep inside the earth up towards the surface by looking at different sets of crystals and the different amounts of gases that they have inside of them. And so there's all of these creative things that we have to do in order to study the earth, to understand how it works and what might happen in the future in terms of things like earthquakes and volcanic eruptions.
Definitely. Rocks telling stories. That's such an interesting perspective. And technology, as we can see, it's evolving rapidly. And it's definitely exciting to think about how AI and data analytics, just like you shared the example of Mr. Zach Ross, it can revolutionize not just research, but also public safety and education. And it shows us the value of staying ahead of the curve and continually adapting to these new technologies and methodologies, and infusing it with our creativity at the same time. And for us students, I think it's crucial to be open to learning and experimenting with these technologies, as they can definitely enhance our understanding and our ability to communicate these complex topics effectively. And
Mhm.
speaking about complexity, Dr. Wendy, you were the only geologist in a sea of geophysicists at IRIS. How did you navigate being the only one with a specific background in a team? And what advice would you give to students who find themselves in similar situations?
It can be difficult to be the only one, you know, the only girl or the only geologist or whatever it is that you may be. But you have to recognize that that gives you a very unique and valuable perspective. And so don't be afraid to speak up and talk about the things that you know, because you have a different subset of knowledge than other people in the room might have. And so while many of the people at IRIS, most of them were seismologists, many of them were engineers, I was the only real geologist that knew about the actual rocks at the surface. And so it was important for me to draw that together, sort of bring it all together from the deep earth up to the surface, literally, and kind of keep bringing it back to why we're doing the work that we do. The data and information that we provide is important, but it's also really important to people and to our cities and communities. And so that in the end was kind of the end goal of understanding what was going on. So I think gives an important perspective, and keep that in mind, even though it may seem a little bit lonely at times.
Definitely, Dr. Wendy. Your experience really highlights the importance of diversity in teams. And definitely, being the only girl in the team, we get to experience that a lot. And listening to you speak, it's empowering to hear how you embraced your unique background and made it an asset and not a weakness. For students like us, it's vital reminder that our differences and our creativity and the things that we bring in from our personal experiences, they foster innovation, and this reinforces the idea that we should never shy away from our distinct perspectives. Instead, we should celebrate and leverage them to contribute in our fields in meaningful ways. And it's all about collaboration and finding strength in diversity. And as we delve deeper into the topic of conversation, especially in science, I was curious to know about your experience in SciComm during the role of a strategic communication specialist for the Earth Science Division at NASA Goddard. What was your approach to explaining complex topics like earthquakes to non scientific audiences, Dr. Wendy?
I think the most important thing is to start at the beginning. We sometimes walk in to education situations or into these situations and think that we have to impress people or that everybody might have the knowledge and background that we have. But I found that if we just start at the beginning and then build with people, that's the best way to communicate things, because everything is complex if you understand it well enough. But there's a lot of things that are important to understand that people just may not have been exposed to. And so it's okay. You're not ever talking down to people. You are just making sure that people are all on the same level. So it's just about breaking it down as much as you can and just being very clear about what your purpose is when you're talking to people. So sometimes, we can have different purposes with different audiences. And if your purpose is to educate, you're going to have a different tact than you do if your purpose is to inspire. And so being clear about your objective, knowing what your audience knows, and starting at the beginning is the best way to move forward with that, in my opinion.
Definitely. Starting at the beginning, it's always refreshing. And as a student, I've often observed it in our classrooms. There's this phenomena that the people who explain a concept in a super complexified manner, they are thought to be more brainy and they're given more importance as compared to the folks who explain the same concept in a simplified manner. Simplifying concepts does not mean diluting their importance. A big takeaway for our audience today. Engaging storytelling, like you mentioned, Dr. Wendy, it can make a world of a difference in how this information is communicated and received to different audiences. And many of us in academia, we generally struggle to present our research in an accessible way. The very point of communication is to help other people understand your perspective and what you're trying to say, what discoveries you have made. And the challenge is not just to share knowledge, but to inspire curiosity and understanding. And definitely, Dr. Wendy, your insights encourage us to find creative ways to connect with our audiences. Yes, so this leads me to my next question about inclusivity. As a founding member of 500 women scientists promoting inclusivity in STEM, what are some practical steps that students, especially women and minorities, can take to overcome systemic barriers in STEM fields?
The very most important thing that you do is make sure that you have a community of support. Build that however you can. Find people that understand and hold them close, because you would need them. And it's also about finding allies, because as a marginalized person in that environment, your voice may not have as much power or as much importance as other people that are the majority in that space. And so if you have a community of people that you can work with that can keep you emotionally safe, you can start to push where you have power to try and make changes. But you also want to make sure that you're making connections to people to help them understand what it's like. Because I have found that most people are good and most people want to help, but they don't know what they don't know. They don't know what it's like to be a minority in this space. They don't know what the challenges and the barriers are. And so open communication with people that are safe allies can help to inform them, and then they can use their voice to help make changes, because it can't just be up to the people that are experiencing the minoritization and all of the barriers that come along with that. It's an added burden that minoritized people should not have to carry. And so making sure to distribute that labor is also really important.
Definitely, experiences often shape us, and finding your tribe, a community of people who have had experiences like yourself, can make how you communicate more easier. They'll be able to understand your perspectives. Allies who understand your perspective can truly empower our voice, which might be not as empowered in a community which has a different mindset. Small changes often make a big difference, and definitely, Dr. Wendy, the actionable steps that you have shared would be a big takeaway for our audience today. For us students, understanding the challenges and learning how to navigate them equips us not only for our careers, but also empowers us to advocate for others. And a big part of that is being empathetic and putting ourselves in the other people's shoes. Well, it's all about lifting each other up and ensuring that these diverse voices are heard. And on that context, touching on the broader issue of geology and seismology, they have had real implications for urban planning and development. Dr. Wendy, should scientists have more of a say in the planning and development of cities in earthquake prone areas, or does that overstep the role of researchers?
Urban planning is a whole field of study that requires deep, thoughtful understanding. And so I think what the best thing researchers can do to help with urban planning and the development of cities, and especially in making wise land use choices when it comes to things like hazard and our changing climate, is to work in partnership with urban planners, developers, engineers, legislative bodies, any of the people that are making those decisions, to make sure that the decisions they're making are based in science. And so that really, I think, is our role, is making sure that we are both doing the science that can be helpful and communicating that science in ways that are understandable and usable to the people that are making those decisions.
Definitely. This circles back to our point about interdisciplinary collaboration. And like you mentioned, as scientists, as planners, as engineers, or even as representatives from the government, everybody needs to bring in their superpowers, their voices, so that they can take the best decisions for their community members. And we, being the community members, can even contribute our voices in participating in think tanks so that we can create safer environments. And it's essential to voice our expertise in these relevant discussions. And speaking about learning and growth, from your adventures so far, Dr. Wendy, what have been your biggest learnings?
I'm fortunate to have been able to travel the world doing geology. And so there's the scientific learning that goes on, which is very profound. The more you see of the world, the more connections that you can make between things. For instance, I study fault systems in the Himalaya and fault systems in California that are very similar, because I can take different pieces of that and apply it to the other. But I think the thing that has been most wonderful for me is being embedded within different communities and seeing the human spirit and all of the things that brings us together and all of the ways that we're the same. You know, the world feels all at once very big, but also very small, because I know so many people and we all have the same heart. We all have the same love. We all have the same care for our families, our environment. And so it makes me feel part of this global community. And in times where things are uncertain globally or politically, I take a lot of heart in that, because I know that there are people around the world that are doing their very best to make the world a better place.
Definitely, it's all about the human connection. We are more similar than we think that we are. And definitely, from your experience of traveling the world, having that opportunity, you got to experience the human spirit at its core. And that's so powerful. Now, reflecting upon how we communicate science, social media has become a very powerful tool. However, it can sometimes oversimplify complex topics. It's a possible risk. So, how do you balance the need for scientific precision with the public's need for quick and digestible information, Dr. Wendy? And what advice do you have for students who want to become effective science communicators?
I think about this a lot, especially when it comes to earthquakes, because we want to get information out quickly, but we also want it to be correct. And there is a trade-off between speed and accuracy. And so being upfront with people that information is likely to change, that this is not the whole story, providing links to information so that people can learn more can help to overcome some of the issues that go along with trying to simplify complex topics on social media. You need to have kind of a deep understanding of the different platforms and how they work so that you can find ways to allow people to take a deeper dive into the subject matter. And you also have to be available to answer questions because misconceptions are going to come up, questions are going to come up, and it's important and normal for people to want to learn more or to ask questions or to say, hey, I heard something different. Can you explain, why you think this is the correct thing? And we have to be open to that. For students to become effective science communicators, the first thing that you need to do is just start. That's the good thing, is that there's all different ways that you can communicate. You can communicate with your peers, you can communicate with your parents, other people in your life. Anybody can start social media accounts if you're old enough, and you can start to communicate in that way. You can ask questions, have conversations. And I would encourage people to write as much as you can, because when we speak about our ideas or have to write them down, the language helps to untangle some of those thoughts and give them form. And the more practice you have with untangling those thoughts and getting all of those ideas in a row, the better you're going to get at it. And so it's a practice thing. Practice, and know that you're going to make some mistakes, and that's okay. The person that never made a mistake is the person that never tried anything new. So always try.
Definitely. Balancing accuracy with accessibility is such a critical skill, especially today. And it highlights the need for us as future scientists and communicators that we should be responsible about how we present this information. Like you said, we are going to be making mistakes, but that's okay. Practice leads to perfection. And it's important to know about the different social media platforms. Sharing the important points and providing links can help the audience to get a deeper dive into what you're trying to communicate to them, and being there as an expert to answer questions. For students, writing is a big means of communication, and definitely this inspires me to think critically about how I can effectively convey different topics while ensuring that the essence of what I'm trying to say is retained. Well, Dr. Wendy, as someone who has navigated both the creative and scientific realms, what do you think the future holds for careers that blends these fields? And what advice would you give to students who are feeling lost or unsure about their career path, especially those with diverse interests?
It's okay if you don't know what you want to do with the rest of your life. I don't. I could change at any time. And you have to allow yourself that. Follow your passions. And those passions may be different. You could love music and also love engineering, and that's okay. You need to have skills that overlap in both of those things. And inevitably, you can bring those two things together. So I know a lot of scientists, different kinds of scientists, different kinds of engineers, and many of the ones who are most successful, and in my opinion, the most interesting, are the ones that have lots of diverse interests. And they can draw on those different parts of their interest, of their talents, of their skills, and bring it into their career. And you can take a break from your career and escape into your interests. And that's okay too. It doesn't have to be all work all the time. And so if you are a student and you don't know exactly what you want to do, that's okay. Try different things. My daughter just started college and she's very worried about her major and taking this class. And I said, just take things that sound interesting to you. Explore who you are, learn about the world around you, and take some of that pressure off. Girl, just try stuff and experiment and explore. It's a wonderful world that we don't explore enough. And you will find ways to bring together your different interests.
That was pure gold, Dr. Wendy, and truly a powerful message for our listeners today, especially the students who are beginning their college days. It's okay to explore different avenues and our unique paths can lead us to fulfilling careers. These unique paths can be can be a collection of different interests. And it's a valuable lesson for all of us to be open minded and adaptable, knowing that our varied experiences can provide us with these unique insights and skills that we can apply in unexpected ways in different fields. And definitely, Dr. Wendy, your story is a testament to that, and it motivates us to embrace our journeys no matter how winding they might seem. Well, it's been truly an insightful conversation so far. Now, let's shift gears a bit to some fun. Dr. Bendy, are you ready for a rapid
I'm-
fire round?
Let's do it.
Let's go. First up, in pop culture, we see a lot of disaster movies with wildly exaggerated earthquakes. Which earthquake scene in a movie makes you laugh or cringe the most, Dr. Bendy? And how would you fix the science in it?
10.5. The 10.5 on the San Andreas? Or, oh no, I take that back. San Andreas with the rock. And so, you see like the tsunami crashing down and all of the roads are buckling and the ground is splitting open. Earthquakes are dramatic enough. You don't have to do all of this other drama to make it interesting. So if The Rock wants some advice, I'm here. So I am happy to advise him on how to make those movies more accurate and also really, really intense.
Definitely, that scene must be hilarious and insightful at the same time, because it's these cinematic moments which generally spark conversations about earthquakes and real science, and that's when experts like you can come into the picture, Dr. Wendy. Well, next up, you have attended Comic Con. So, Dr. Wendy, if you could create a comic book or an animated series that highlights the achievements of women in STEM, what would be your superhero alter ego, and how would you use your seismic knowledge to save the world?
If I could create a comic book or animated series, I would say I would bring together a group of my If Then ambassador sisters and give each of us a superpower that had to do with ways that we can battle climate change. And so mine would be something like, I think making sure, because climate change is increasing the amount of water that the atmosphere can hold, which leads to more rainfall in lots of different places. And so I would give the hills the strength to stand up to increased rainfall so that we have less landslides and debris flows and those sorts of mass movements that can happen either because of increased rainfall or because of earthquakes. So I would be like the mountain mama holding the world together.
Well, you described that in an amazing way, wearing the hat of an artist indeed. Mountain Mama, a creative concept. Well, on that note itself, if you could assemble an Avengers like team of real life women in STEM, who would be on your team, and what global challenges would you tackle together along with climate change?
Oh my goodness. I think one of the biggest issues that we have right now is water scarcity. And so I would bring together a group of my If Then sisterhood, because they have such diverse backgrounds and interests. I would bring together Sam Wins. She's an ecologist. And so she would be able to understand how we can use plants and animals to adapt to a changing climate. I would bring in my friend Becca, who's a biogeofeminist, she says, and she studies the water carbon interaction. And so we would work together and create kind of scientific partnerships to help make sure that the plants and animals are getting enough water. And then I would bring in, oh my gosh, Kimberly Rain Miner. And she's a climate scientist. And so we could talk about how we could terraform the earth to go back to the way it was before the Industrial Revolution. So that would be my team.
Definitely. In Bangalore, we had the summer in which we faced water scarcity firsthand. We had people rationing for water. People used to go into malls for their everyday business. And definitely, Bangalore needs Avengers like you and the amazing women who you mentioned as part of your answer, Dr. Wendy. Well, talking about women who are making a difference, if someone were to write a song about your life, what genre would best capture your story, and which artist would you choose to sing it?
I am a huge Swiftie, so it would be Taylor Swift. I would love to have Taylor Swift sing a song about my life. So it would be kind of a, or maybe Lizzo. It would be like a pop rock ballad, but like catchy, but also like the kind that makes you want to get up and like go change the world. But it would definitely be Taylor Swift or maybe Lizzo.
I'm a Swiftie as well, and meeting a fellow Swiftie who's making such a big impact on the world. I mean, I literally have goosebumps right now. Even I would definitely choose the Taylor Swift to write a song about my life. I mean, the man, it was such a beautiful concept, especially not only her lyrics, but even in her music video, where she donned the character of the man. At first, when I watched the video, I was like, this can't be Taylor. But then I watched the behind the scenes and I was like, it's what it says. The beauty in her songwriting, like she's one of the best songwriters and storytellers of this era, and I think that she would be able to do the best justice in describing my story or anyone else's story and singing it in her powerful voice. Swifties, they're changing the world.
That's true. They are. And I like what you did there with the eras.
Well, that was quite fun, and so far it's been absolutely inspiring listening to your journey and insights, Dr. Wendy. Thank you so much for your time. And as we come to the end of this episode, let's wrap up all the learnings and takeaways in our last segment, the Inspire segment. First off, Dr. Wendy, who or what has been your biggest inspiration in life and why?
I mean, I want to say my parents, but that's sort of obvious. And there's a lot of people that have mentored me through my time. But I think my biggest inspiration has been my peers, different women that I've known, different scientists that I've known, that I've seen their struggles. I've seen what they've had to overcome. And I have just so much respect for that. And I know and have, I was always able to see what they could do, their potential. And to see them reach that potential despite obstacles that they may have had continues to inspire me today. And so I would say it would have to be my peers and my friends.
Definitely. It's these role models that we find in our immediate environment who often shape our paths and motivate us to overcome different challenges and obstacles in life. Well, Dr. Wendy, what words of inspiration were given to you that you would like to pass along to others?
I had someone say to me, it's going to make me, your voice matters. And that I carry with me. There are moments when I have to walk into boardrooms or to meetings and it feels really scary. And I am the only woman, or I'm the only, imposter syndrome. I'm like, what am I doing here? This seems really big. And I hear that in my head, like, your voice matters. And so that's what I would say to you, is that your voice matters, your perspective matters, and bringing your unique skills and ideas to the world really will make changes for the better.
Definitely. Every voice matters. You matter. And those words are truly inspirational and a big takeaway for all our listeners today. The importance of believing in yourself, sometimes it happens, especially when you're the only person in a particular room with a particular background. You feel like you don't want to raise your hand to, bring out your voice, because you'll be making the other people uncomfortable because they haven't had the same experiences. But then eventually it's that unique perspective that you're bringing in into that conference room, or that discussion, or that brainstorming session, that will truly make a difference, because it's diversity which helps different perspectives to be more enlightened. So definitely, it encourages us to persevere and reminds us that each setback can be a stepping stone to greater achievements in life. And finally, as we close our inspiring conversation, what can we as children and young people do to make the world a better place?
Show up as yourself. Who you are is important, and the way you see the world is important. And so find a problem that matters to you, and then find little ways that you can make a difference, right? Because there are big changes that make big differences, but more than that, and more often, it's the little things that we do day in and day out that make a difference. And so don't feel like you don't have any power just because you're young. and just look around and see what you can do to help and to learn and to be involved, because those little things have ripples and we don't know how far those ripples can go.
Definitely. The changes does not always have to be grand, and even small actions can have a big impact, and it inspires all of us to take personal responsibility and recognize our potential to contribute positively to the society. And as students, it's a big reminder that we hold the key towards creating a better future, and every step and every voice counts towards progress. Well, Dr. Wendy, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to join us today, sharing your invaluable insights with us. From your early beginnings in acting to pivoting into geology after the life altering Hector Mine earthquake, it's been fascinating to learn about how each twist and turn in your career has shaped your path. And your unique perspectives, both as a scientist and a communicator, really stands out. Whether it's balancing the intricacies of science with public engagement, or finding creative ways to make these earthquakes and natural disasters accessible to everyone, the science behind it accessible to everyone. Your inspiring work, your groundbreaking work with 500 women scientists advocating for inclusivity in STEM to show your impactful work that you have done in these organizations. You have shown us that combining passion with purpose in the pursuit of knowledge, it all makes a difference. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us once again, Dr. Wendy.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure to talk to you and to hear your thoughts on all of this. And I hope that all of your listeners can make sure that they follow their interests, follow their hearts. And really, I believe you can make the world a better place.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wendy. And to our listeners, I hope that this conversation has inspired you as much as it has inspired me. Dr. Wendy's story reminds us that whether you're drawn towards the arts or the sciences or anywhere in between, there's always room to follow your curiosity and make an impact. From understanding seismic hazards to creating more inclusive environments in STEM, Dr. Wendy's journey shows us that it's possible to embrace multiple passions and forge your own path. For those wanting to learn more about Dr. Wendy's incredible work, make sure to follow her social media at the rate of Dr. Wendy Rocks and her website at wendybohon.com for more updates on her exciting career and projects. And to deepen your knowledge on everything STEM, sustainability, and education, subscribe to the SDG Warriors Podcast for in depth discussions and meaningful conversations with leading experts just like Dr. Wendy, who are shaping a better world, better eras, one groundbreaking action at a time. If you love this episode, help others discover it by leaving a review and sharing it with your friends, teachers, and family. Remember to stay curious, challenge the status quo, and be the change. Until next time, it's bye from the SDG Warriors.
Every